Yeah, requesting everyone to go on mute, please. And good afternoon and welcome everyone again for the another 5-day Connect series with ISODA to upskill and share as much as information with the new learnings for the ISODA community and its companies as well. Today we have a very profound speaker and we'll be having a series of session with him. As we know, today in India, we have a Privacy Act already in place in the name of Digital Personal Data Protection Act. And this is something, is a law which will be applicable to each and every organization in the country. So even if you are collecting the minimal of amount of data of your end customers, you will be liable to follow that law. And for that, we have Ms. Shivangi Nadkarni to talk about. Now, let me, before he starts the discussion about the privacy and about the DPDPA Act, right? I want to give her just her profile. Now, Shivangi has done her post graduation in management through IIM Kolkata, and she's an electronics engineer from BITS Pilani. She's a certified CISA and a regular practitioner and a faculty with DSCI. She's also a speaker at TEDx. She is has more than 25 years of experience in the domain of privacy and information security. And today she is a co-founder to a company called Arca with her co-founder Samir Anja. We lost him recently, but yes, he has been very known name in the market, and he has done a lot of good job for the privacy in the industry. And as far as Shivangi goes, I mean, she has won several accolades and recognition, including the Deloitte Fast Tech 50 in last 2 years in a row. She has been has multiple awards and stations that include ASSOCHAM's Women in Cyber Leading, Vedika Women's Alliance, Women Tech Leader, and CQ Dynamic 100, Women Changing Face of Indian Cyberspace. So I think there is no other uh, person more qualified to talk about privacy with us and our association and to give us more information about how and what a privacy is all about. And we, as I said, this is a series of sessions. So we'll be seeing her, two more times where today she'll be discussing about more what privacy is and what is the DPDPA Act. And then we'll be seeing, talking about the whole Privacy Act, what it really means and how, and the third session we'll be talking about, she'll be talking about that, how it can be implemented in the organizations. And that is really very important part. So please do not miss any part of it because everything is very connected, right? And this will really be helpful for us as well as to talk to our customers as well, right? So without wasting much time, I hand over the stage to Shivangi. Over to you, and we look forward to hear you. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ajay. And once again, thank you for inviting me and for that very generous introduction. I see some familiar faces here, so that's nice as well. Let me share my screen and yeah, can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, great. So when Ajay actually approached me to say that I should take a session, I was telling him that if we really want to understand the act for what it means in terms of its essence, because there's a lot of discussion going around in the legal circles, especially, and understanding the legal nuances of the act. But if we look at it from an organization's perspective, a good idea would be to first understand what privacy itself is, so it helps us understand how and where the law plays a role and in what fashion. So that's why we said let's dedicate this session to understanding first of all basics of privacy, and then if we have time today I can start with the act or we'll look at it in the next session. Yeah, and feel free to stop me and ask me questions anytime. If I can request Samina or Ajay sometime, because I may not be able to see the chat in this full Zoom mode. So if there are any questions in the chat, feel if you could just tell me, so read them out, I can address them then and there.
Sure, sure. So Samina can help you on with that. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So. So let me just move. So what I'll jump into, as I said, what exactly is data privacy, and then we look at the DPDPA itself. Okay. So if we take a few steps back and if we look at how let's understand what privacy is from an individual perspective first. Okay. So what do we as individuals do when we interact online, right? So let's say we interact with a digital property, and when I say a digital property, it can mean an app, it can mean a website, it could mean even a smart device like that you're interacting with, like an Alexa. It could be a smart, even a smart vehicle, for example. And there are so many other devices and properties. So when we typically interact with a property, we give it two things, right? We give it our attention. That's what we do consciously. And while we're giving it attention, a lot of data, you may actually, feed in a few things, but a lot of data about us gets passed in the background. Okay. So what does the digital property do? It basically collects, uses, and discloses our personal data, which is available with it. Back at the back end, it pumps it into what is known as an advertising ecosystem. I'm calling it an ecosystem because it's a huge industry. The last I know, it's about $300 billion plus globally, and it is something which is and we'll talk about how that works, and believe and understand that this is a legitimate ecosystem. It is, we are not talking cybercrime, underworld, etc., etc. This is about the board legal, proper business organizations, and they run this industry. Okay. Now, because it gets pumped into this, our data gets pumped into this ecosystem. In return, what that ecosystem does is basically pays the digital property and gives it ads that need to be delivered to us. Okay. In the process, we also get a whole set of services. Some of them may be paid. Many of them are free that today we take for granted. For example, Gmail, mail, search, social media, all kinds of free apps or partially paid apps, right? Now, they're all making tons of money, but how are they making money? We are not paying them, right? They get paid by the ad ecosystem. So essentially, our payment currency is our personal data, right? And in return, we get a free service. Now, in the process, we end up creating digital footprints via all that we do online, right from what we browse to where we go, who we like, who we chat with, what we watch, the music we listen to, etc., etc., right? Now, in the process, you have all of this gets organized by algorithms, and a certain the and a certain digital footprint about us gets created, right? And this digital footprint is not static. Okay, it gets generated over a period of time. It is a constantly sort of evolving. Different footprints are generated by different entities, and the whole thing again is combined with offline data, pumped into the advertising ecosystem, and it's fed back into those entities, who in turn use it to feed you content, to feed you pro advertisement, etc., etc. Okay. Now, the question is, so what, right? It's a good thing, right? If this is happening, so what? Now, over a period of time, we start operating in what are known as echo chambers. Okay, we start seeing only content which is our type, right? News that is tailored to our likes and dislikes, opinion pieces that echo our opinions, even the kind of recommendations we get in terms of music, books, etc. It just reinforces our ideas and beliefs. Today, in fact, for example, and I like to do this experiment when I'm teaching a class physically, where a particular term that each of us, let's say, searches on Google, you will get slightly different results, and the results are based on your profiling. Okay. Now the question is again, so what, right? The problem is that over a period of time, this starts shaping our ideas, views, political, ideological beliefs, and it leads to chasms in society and starts influencing behavior to the extent that we've seen this 5 6 years ago when Brexit happened, when the Trump election happened. A lot of it was driven by people using this, and this was, I mean, you can imagine now over the years how much more sophisticated this has got, right? So let's see how this happens. Let's see what happens in the background. Okay. We're all, familiar with how mobile devices work, right? For us, so we all know that apps connect to mobile devices using something called permissions. Most of them are required for the app to function. However, certain permissions are called dangerous permissions. It's a terminology coined by Android. Why are they dangerous? Because the kind of personal data that can get pulled out via those permissions, or the kind of actions that can be kicked off on that device via those permissions, can really compromise an individual's privacy and cause harms. Okay, which is why they're called. So things like access to camera, access to microphone, access to your contacts, your SMSs, etc., etc. These are all dangerous permissions. Okay. Now the story doesn't end there. All apps also have SDKs embedded in it. Most of you who are familiar with the world of security will agree that some of them tend to be malicious, which are identified when you do security testing. Okay. But the non-malicious SDKs are the legitimate ones which the app developer has installed in the app for certain functionalities. Okay. Now these typically are third-party SDKs, pieces of code which are embedded in the app. Now, the data that is gathered via permissions, it comes directly from the user, it comes from the background, from other apps and mobile devices. And this gets sent not only to the organization to whom the app belongs to, it gets sent to each of the third parties to whose SDKs are embedded in it. And they all individually pump it into the advertising ecosystem. So you may think you have installed the app of X company, but in reality, not only is that X company using your data, but all the embedded third parties are using your data and further sharing it. Okay? The web ecosystem is no different. In fact, it's far more sophisticated, considering it's far more older, right? So you have all kinds of tracking technologies. We keep thinking of just cookies, but there are tons of others tracking technologies. Okay. Now again, same thing happens. Data gets picked from the user, shared in the background, and so on and so forth. The other one is what we call the social media ecosystem. Now, we are all familiar with seeing this, right? Sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google, etc. What we often forget is the app or the website that gives you this functionality gets access to your account. So, Google, in fact, has 3 levels of access: basic, medium, full. Somebody who takes full access actually gets access to your Google account exactly to the level that you do when you put in your user ID password. Okay, and this is without requiring your user ID password. So, we at ARCA do this annual study every year. We've done 6 in a row now, where we study Indian apps and websites for how they do in terms of these kind of permissions, cookies, etc. And mind you, these are not social media; these are regular business websites, stuff that we use, on a day-to-day basis: banking, fintech, news, travel, etc., gaming, etc. Okay. So typically look at this about Indian mobile apps. This is from last year's study. About 76% Android apps take exact location, access to exact location. Now you think about it. If I am ordering a cab, or if I am ordering for some food delivery, obviously they need to know my exact location. But if I am if mine is a news app, okay, or if I'm listening to some music, why do they need exact permission, exact location? They can make do with knowing there's a course location permission available where you can figure out where in a 1 square kilometer radius a user is located. However, you find 76% of apps taking access to exact location. Similarly, 76% take access to camera, 57 to microphone, and so on. The other interesting piece is that I've heard so many people who are especially Mac users, Apple users, right? They sometimes tend to be very smug because they say that, oh, Apple, I'm sorted, everything is secure, everything is private. So why one thing to remember is that while at the OS level, Apple has done some excellent things, you have to be aware that that's only at the OS level. At the app level, they can finally take the permissions that they want to, and there's nothing that Apple can do. So look at the data, right? 83% of iOS apps, of the same iOS apps, okay, we track iOS and Android versions of the same app and the website associated with it. 83% are taking access to exact location. So don't be under the impression that just because you're using an iOS device, things are completely sorted. um, how is it being collected? Because we've been doing this for a while now, we have some trends. If you see apps accessing camera, apps accessing microphone, it's been just going up over the years. If you look at the website side of things, right, 88% websites in India that we have studied have third party trackers embedded in it. The average number of third party trackers is 21 per website. Again, I'm not talking social media. Okay. I'm talking our regular websites that we visit on a day to day basis. 15 of those third party trackers are known advertisers, right? So you know that these are advertising third parties embedded over there. Okay? The other interesting thing that we did only last year, and those of you who have dealt with the apps know that when you actually host an app on the App Store or the Play Store, you have to declare which permissions you take, what to what extent, etc. Okay, so we decided to do a test of what is the reality versus what is being declared, and we found that, for example, location, okay, in terms of Android apps, 42%, 76%, 42% of the organizations are declaring on the Play Store or the on the Play Store for Android, saying that we are taking location permission, but in reality 76% are taking access to location permission. Similarly, camera 36 versus 76, microphone 9 versus 57%. Look at the discrepancy. iOS similarly, 8 versus 64%. So what are we talking about, right? What is being said and what is being made? So if you, I'm sure this is something which is in some way must be a spooky, but I'm sure some of, each of us has experienced this in some way or the other, right? So, let's say a couple is having breakfast at home and is discussing, let's say, a vacation to Bali during Christmas, okay? Nothing, they're just having a, open discussion. A while later, the husband in his office searches for hotels and flights to Bali on his laptop. Okay, the wife hasn't done anything. A while later, the wife visits a news site on her iPad and she starts seeing ads for Bali. Okay. And this goes on, right? And you wonder, for example, similarly, you wonder, I was just talking about, let's say, buying a shoe, and then I start seeing ads for shoes wherever I visit, right? Now you know what happens and why it happens, right? Because of this complex ecosystem at the back end, right? So the question that often comes is there something we can do about this? As individuals, there is really nothing you can do except, be careful about what you install and stuff, what you visit and so on. Therefore, you need governments, regulators, civil society, etc. to step in to define rights of individuals over their personal data and enable the protection of these rights, which is what happens via laws like we've had our DPDPA passed just now, right? And as organizations, of course, you can implement best practices, compliance, etc., to safeguard the rights of the individuals you deal with, which is known data principals, or globally they're known as data subjects. So, having said this, we still haven't answered the question about what exactly is data privacy, right? So, let's understand that. So, first of all, at the heart of data privacy is personal data. It is only about personal data, which is sometimes called PI and PII and so on. Why is this important to state? Is because when we look at an organization typically deals with all kinds of data, right? Some of it is personal data, not all of it is personal data. So, especially if you're going in from a security angle, you're looking at all data within those programs. But when you're looking at privacy, you only look at personal data. Then comes the question, what really constitutes personal data, right? Intuitively, we all, you know that demographic data, identity data, financial, health, etc., we all intuitively know is personal data. Right? That's what we call above the surface data. However, there is today a host of data which is embedded below the surface, which is also considered personal data. Okay, things like device identifiers, cookies, online identifiers, location data, social media markers, data that is coming out of sensors, RFID tags, smart devices, even vehicular data, for example, data that comes out as a result of analytics that is thrown up, and so on. All of it is considered personal data. So the crux of personal data is what we call identifiability, whether it's directly or indirectly identified. Okay. So when all of this is personal data, therefore, what is data privacy? Okay. So let's assume that I am dealing with an organization, let's say a bank. Okay. Please note, I'm not using social media. Let's say I'm dealing with a bank. Okay. In return, I enjoy certain privileges, and those privileges, for example, I want to know, is the PD or personal data being collected more than what is required, for whatever you're taking my data for? Are you using it only for the purposes that I have consented to, or are you using it for something else as well? Are you sharing it with a third party without my knowledge? Are you storing it after its usage is over? Are you tracking and profiling me? And are you also keeping it secure, right? Properly protected. The last bit is what data security is about. But data privacy is all of this and some more. Okay. It's very important to understand that privacy covers all of this, because sometimes we tend to use the term data security and data privacy interchangeably and very loosely. Okay, so now that we have a law and that we have to look at privacy, we need to understand that privacy is essentially ensuring that you and I as individuals get access to these privileges that we have, as well as a lot more. Okay, now each of this is nothing but what are called principles in privacy, and every law in the world has these principles embedded in it. They may use some slightly different nomenclature and so on and so forth, but this is what most all data protection and privacy regulations have. Okay? Any questions before I get into the act or anything else? Any questions on, of course, privacy is a very deep subject, but I've just tried to give a quick overview.
Shivangi Kamal here.
Yeah.
So, my understanding of privacy and the way I always looked at this has been that we should look at as individuals. What can you just hold on? Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. So, what I was saying is that as an individual, so I think privacy is about having the power of your data in your hand, right? And you want to look at how others are using it, and possibly they are not misusing it, and over a period of time, more and more power coming to me.
Yes.
So from those point of view, I think it's very, very important possibly in short and long term, to look at what kind of, it could be that if they're using my data in some specific way, I should draw more advantage, right? Or they should give me something more only then they can use it. Because typically, if I were to look at majority of the organization are not using it appropriately. So is it right understanding?
Absolutely. Part B of what you said is a result of that, right? Yours, which is not really under privacy. It is to say that an organization can use my data by only after what I've consented to or other legal basis, and not use it for something they're not supposed to use it for. The second part of what you said, which is that if they're using it for something more than I'm entitled to something else, is really a downstream thing. It's not really anything to do with it. I will say therefore that can I request to go silent? Yeah. So therefore that is something which is between me and the organization. I may say that I may be someone who's saying that, okay, you use my data more for more purposes than I want something in return. You may be someone who says that don't use my data for extra purposes, period. I don't want anything in return, right? So that's a different aspect.
Perfect. But primarily because in India, I don't think individuals or subjects as of now are concerned at all. So more and more awareness will really go. So I think there's a lot of role which all of us need to play so that people really become aware about what they have, so that they go and start demanding it.
Absolutely.
So that, okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else has any other questions? Okay, so let me just move to the next part, which is to look at how all of this ties in with the DPDP. Okay, so why do I say first of all that it's the dawn of a new era? Because India is, by the way, the 138th country in the world to get a privacy law. Even Sri Lanka had a law before us. Okay. But it was the most awaited law around the world, simply because we are now the single largest digital nation in the world. 1.4 billion people's digital data. Okay, because I've spent so long in this industry, I remember days when all the discussion used to be around this. Now it's tapered off, but I still hear it from time to time, which is that, oh, India mein kabhi privacy nahi hoga. We are never going to have privacy in India because I tell my life story to the stranger next to me on the plane or the bus or the train, right? What people are missing in that argument is confusing data privacy with data as culture. See, as culturally for the next 10 generations, we will keep telling our life history to the stranger next to us. That is not the point. The point is that personal data about you and me in the digital format is available today for the whole world to do whatever they feel like with it. And that is the problem statement that the law is attempting to solve. Okay. It is not about privacy as culture. It is about protection of personal data, exactly as what Kamal pointed out. It is about giving us control on our personal data. Okay. And because it's such a large thing, there was so much of anticipation that there were trade talks, trade negotiations put on hold until the law came out. Okay, so there was a lot attached to the passing of this law. So let's understand the key aspects. So first of all, the law says that for any personal data that you process, you should have, as in the organization, should have a clear purpose for processing. Okay, you begin with the purpose. Now make sure for that purpose you get the data principle, which is the individual's consent for each of those purposes. Okay. Of course, there are other means of what are called legitimate, uses instead of consent. Like, for example, for employment purposes, you don't need to get consent. For upkeep and law and order, you don't need to get consent. But those are different aspects. Let's not look at. But in general, you need to get the data principles consent for each purpose of processing. And when I say each purpose, Let's say, for example, I'm a financial institution. I'm collecting data for, let's say, providing a loan product. But if I choose to use your data for, let's say, sending you direct marketing messages, that's a different purpose. Okay, so they need to get different consent for associated with each of these purposes. Next important point is limit usage of whatever you do with the data. Limit the processing that you do with the data only to these purposes and nothing beyond that. Okay. Then collect only what is needed for those purposes, and don't collect. If you're collecting, let's say, to offer me a bank account, today a bank requires 100 data points from me. Okay, are collecting 100 data points from me, but they actually require only, let's say, 70 of those. So those extra 30, they need to give me a choice, and I decide whether I want to provide it or not. Okay, so collect only what you need, provide a choice for the rest. Delete the personal data after the purpose is served or if the user withdraws consent. Okay. However, there are other laws that require you to retain data. Let's say, for example, employee data, right? You need to retain because there is PF, there are PF laws, there are banking laws, there are labor laws. So if they have something else, then those regulations take over. Otherwise, anything that doesn't come under the purview of any other legislation, you have to take. And then, of course, you have to provide a notice which declares all that you do with the user's data, which has to be published in all the places where you collect it. Okay? This is, in my opinion, part A of the Act. Part B of the Act is for any personal data that you process, you implement security safeguards, and if there is a breach, you have to report it to the regulator, which is the data protection board that is being set up, and to who is the individual who is impacted. This is a big thing from a security perspective, because till now there have been certain guidelines, but I don't see too much of implementation of it. But today you're talking about reporting. Even the reporting to certain is only to certain, but now you're saying you need to inform me if it's my data. I need to know if it's been breached, right? So that is another critical part. And then you need to set up grievance redressal mechanisms so that individuals can reach out to the organization. Some organizations are going to be classified as what is known as significant data fiduciaries, or SDFs. Only the parameters for deciding who is going to be an SDF is embedded in the law, but the central government from time to time will notify who comes under this. But the underlying thought behind this is to say that anybody who does processing which is high risk can be considered significant data fiduciary. So if you're doing high volume of personal data processing, or you're processing extremely sensitive data like health data or children's data and so on, or you're doing the kind of processing you're doing is going to result in something which is highly intrusive or impacting an individual, all these are likely to come under the SDF category. Okay, so now if you come under the SDF category, there are additional measures that you have to implement. What do those include? It includes appointing a data protection officer who's senior enough, reporting to the board or to a equivalent of a board. You need to conduct data audits by appointing a data auditor. Okay, and this is a completely new thing. And you need to carry out data protection impact assessments, and there are a few other measures for that. So essentially the takeaway is that if you are an SDF, there would be some additional measures that you need to comply with. Okay. The law has come down very heavily on children's data, which is a good thing, because the legislation is so late in the day, we could incorporate this in the law itself. Otherwise, if you look at other laws like GDPR, etc., they're bringing out additional regulations to add on to the law. Okay, so children's data is a big thing globally. What is required under the India law? You get verifiable consent from the parent or guardian. The second part is very important. You cannot do tracking or behavioral profiling of children, and you cannot do targeted advertising to children online. Okay, this is a very big thing. And in general, there's a blanket statement which says that no processing that is likely to cause any detrimental effect on the well-being of the child can be carried out. Okay, so lots to protect children, and I think that's the right thing to do. In addition, another very powerful thing that the law accords is rights to you and I as individuals. Okay, going back to the key thing that Kamal brought up, which is giving us control over our data, right? The rights are a big way of ensuring that. What are the 4 rights under the India law? The first right is what is called right to access information about my personal data. So if today I invoke this right, I can approach any organization, whether I have a history with that organization or any sort of relationship. I may not have been a customer or have any other kind of association with them. I can still exercise this right. And what can I do? I can go and when I exercise this right, the organization is supposed to give me what personal data about me is being processed by them, what is the processing activity undertaken, who are all the organizations with whom data has been shared, and what data has been shared with which organization. Okay, it's a big ask. Second is right to correction and erasure. I can invoke the right to look at what data about me is with the organization, correct it, and request for erasure of personal data. We are all very familiar with this right to erasure because it's there in most laws around the world, right? Then we have a right to grievance redressal, which means that if I have a grievance, I have a right to ensure that it is addressed. And right to nominate, which is interesting and new, if not seen in other legislations, which is that I can do nomination of my data, okay, which is another big step forward. If some of you recollect, there was this big discussion and hue and cry about localization and international data transfer, etc. All of that has been done away with. In the final law that has been passed, the government has just said they may blacklist certain countries where you cannot transfer data. Otherwise, data can be transferred wherever it you want to. Which countries they will blacklist, I think we'll have to wait and watch. The entire governance of the act is they're going to set up a data protection board, and the DPB will oversee the whole act. Okay. One of the reasons why everybody's taking cognizance of this is the penalties associated and the quantum of penalties. Okay, in fact, even the first version of the bill up to Justice Sri Krishna's version, we were still talking of 5 crores and 25 crores. But ever since this version of the bill started came out into the public domain and it became an act, the quantum has just gone up. So we're talking 200 250 crores. Okay, and this is still low by global standards, so there's been criticism about this as well. But however, I think by Indian standards, it's still huge. One of the reasons why the act is being taken seriously. Okay. The act is, why is it called the Digital Personal Data Protection Act? Is because it's only applicable to digital data. Digital data is defined as data which is collected in digital form, or it could be data collected or maintained in non-digital form but is subsequently digitized. Okay, so let's say you fill up a paper form and then that paper form gets scanned. Then the moment it gets scanned, it becomes digital and it comes under the purview of that. It is applicable to, of course, any personal data that is processed in India. It doesn't matter if the person is an Indian citizen, Indian resident, foreign visitor, etc., etc. If the processing happens in India, it comes under the purview of the Act. If processing is taking place outside India, but in connection with any activity that is related to any kind of goods and services offered to individuals in India, then that also comes under the purview of that. This is no different from most other privacy acts, like including the GDPR and so on. This is how most legislations around the world are. Another question that often comes up is what really comprises processing. Okay, so please understand, processing includes right from collection to destruction. Okay, so collecting data is also considered processing. So it could be processing, it could be, and you could collect data in person from the user. It can be collected via websites, what the user provides via forms, posts, etc. It may be what is gets picked up by cookies, trackers, etc. It may be data that comes in via mobile apps, as well as below the surface from permissions. It may be data that comes in via APIs. There's data that comes in from third parties. All of the data collection is called processing. Okay. Then recording, organizing, structuring, storing data, including data stored in archives and backups. Okay, adaptation, alteration, retrieval, use, alignment, indexing, sharing, disclosure. Disclosure can be by transmission, by dissemination, or just sharing either with manual or automated means. Let's say, for example, with outsourced partners, it could be data that gets shared via SDKs embedded in mobile apps. We just talked about it, right? That go to, let's say, big tech, social media. It could be data that goes as part of SDKs that are there for features and functionalities, or you could have other value added services. It could be data that's disclosed via third party trackers or cookies in websites or via APIs, right? And then onward to destruction or erasure. Even somebody who, we often come across this as a question with our clients, where we say that, people tell us, oh, but we are just working off somebody's virtual machine. But that is also considered processing by you. Okay? So just remember that you need to spend a minute thinking about what processing involves, and it involves all of this. So who are the actors? Just to sort of sum it up, you have at the center of it all, you and I as individuals, who's the data principal. Then data about me gets collected and processed by various organizations. One category of organizations, the main actor in all this, is called as the data fiduciary, or those of you who are familiar with privacy, this is the term used for data controllers in outside India. This is basically the entity that decides why data about me is being collected and how it is going to be used. It's called process and means, okay? Purpose and means, sorry. This may be done directly by the organization, or it may be done by a third party on behalf of the organization, right? So those are all data processors. Then you have, as we said, a subset of data fiduciaries would be significant data fiduciaries, where certain special types of organizations would come in. So SDFs are expected to appoint the DPO and as well as a data auditor. And then you have the Data Protection Board of India as well as the central government. So this is the entire ecosystem of players. Okay. So I think I'll stop here for today. And if there are any questions, because this is a lot of information, I won't, we can jump into other aspects around implementing all of this later. Let's just focus on making sure we've understood the crux of the law. So any questions or any thoughts?
Any questions, people?
Hi, Prashant. Good to connect.
Hi, how are you? Good time.
Good, good.
It's been a very long time.
I know. Good to connect after a long time. Hope you're well as well.
No, I am very well. I was not able to join on time, a bit late
No
because
worries.
of my other pre-engagements, but I joined later on in between. It was very worthwhile as a session, I must say. A lot of eye-openers.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Shivangi here? Ajay, I'm sure you may be having.
I keep on asking her always, so it's. I think it's not right for me to ask questions. I think let the.
But then, if there's no questions from other persons, Kailashi, you have any questions? I believe yes.
Yeah, I have a very brilliant question actually, because we provide all these solution services to customers, and in that process, we collect a lot of customer data, and their personal contacts data as well. So how this act is applicable to us, and how we can protect ourselves?
Yeah. So this is applicable to the extent of that personal data that you collect, right? It's in your custody. And therefore you will have to, with respect to that data and how you use it, you'll have to, adhere to the requirements of that. So for example, if you're collecting data and, make sure that there is a legal basis for collecting that. So, whether you take consent, whether it comes under deemed consent, there are different heads. And I didn't go into those depths, but we can discuss that as well. And then make sure that you use it only for the purposes. So let me give you an example. Let's say you go to a meeting, or you go to an event and you pick up somebody's visiting card, right? So the visiting card, let's say I'm giving you my visiting card, I am definitely giving you what I call my deemed consent to get in touch with me, right? To communicate with me. However, if you decide to then share that data with, let's say, a sister concern, and tell them ki I have this person or these sets of people in my, or in my contact list, and then you can go ahead and use it as you want, that is then violating my deemed consent. Okay, so for that you have to come back and get my specific consent. So deemed consent is to say that I give it to you with an understanding that this is all that you will use my data. Okay, so that is one example. Or for example, you collect data and you somebody the other day asked me a very interesting question, which is that, let's say I put up a stall in a exhibition, and the exhibition organizers then share a list of all the attendees with me. What do I do? Am I the fiduciary over here?
That is sometimes made available to scan the name card and you get the data.
Yes. So in that case, you are a receiver. You are not you're the processor. You're not the controller. So then you have to make sure that the event organizers have got the consent to be able to use the data and use it for marketing purposes. Now you use it for some other purpose, then you have to go back and get consent. So that is, how this whole thing kind of works. To give you put it on the other way. So let's say that not moving away from your example, but let's say, for example, I go to a website of an organization that has 3 lines of businesses. Okay, I shop on one line of business, and then I give my consent to, let's say, get direct mailers for whatever is that line of business. Okay, but tomorrow they decide to also send me mailers for the other 2, but I haven't consented to receive that. Okay, right now what happens is nobody anyway asks us. There's no consent taken anyway. It's taken for granted and data is happily shared. But that cannot be allowed moving forward with this act.
So this brings me to another question, taking it forward from what you said.
Yeah.
We are an organization. You are aware about our organization. What do? We start with digital signature certificates. We still do that. So a lot of information, personal data comes to us to process the digital signatures. And then these customers could be using some other solution from us, maybe let's say an SSL certificate, or the support is required for the downloading the certificate in the HSM.
Right.
Now, when we are talking about solutions, it does not mean probably that I may be product specific. I may be looking at solution wherein multiple technologies are required to be integrated together to provide the right kind of solution to the customer to solve that particular problem.
Right.
Now, since you could, it's someone's outlook how to consider that. Would these be considered as separate lines of business, or if we are probably putting that data in our database for sending out marketing emails? So what does this mean for us? What precautionary measures should we be required to take?
Yeah, so good question. So if I'm purchasing a digital signature certificate from you, or even an SSL cert, and I'm giving you my personal data, and I give you a lot of personal data, right, while I'm doing that. Now all of it is understood, like you help me, you call me to help me install, you provide extra services or extra products to make sure all that all falls under a single purpose. Okay. However, you then say that I'm also going to send you, mailers. So first of all, whether I can send you mailers to sell you more certificates, or I keep sending you mailers to one set of mailers to say that your certificate is expiring, please renew it, right? That's considered part of the original purpose because it's part of the product. But if I say that, okay, I'm going to send you a mailer to, let's say that let's say I'm selling a Microsoft product tomorrow. Now that is a different purpose. Okay. So you have to then make sure that that purpose also gets covered, and you get consent for that.
But doesn't that, counter the whole game of marketing?
It basically is going to affect the whole marketing, this thing today, big time. Globally, people are struggling.
This is the next big challenge. The email marketing, especially that kind of segment, will be largely affected.
Yeah.
Because a lot of it is promotional and maybe non-consensual, of course.
Yeah. See, and it's not saying stop sending. It is saying that today, I may be very happy to get all kinds of mailers from, 10 shopping sites I go to, or, I want to know the latest offer that's available. Okay. But you, Ajay, may be very particular. You don't want to receive. The point is, today we don't have a choice, right? What this says is you give a choice. Give it only to the people who want it. Don't keep giving it to, don't shove it down everyone's throat.
Because tomorrow someone would say probably, okay, if you're doing that, why did you not send me that information?
Yeah.
So this is probably, people might not be even aware whether to provide that qualitative kind of a consent or otherwise, or what is the implication if the consent is provided or otherwise.
No, see, because most of the businesses today works on the cold calling and cold emailing, right? That's the major part of almost every businesses today.
Yeah.
Right. And we must accept the fact that, cold emailing and cold calling works. Even though the law of average is really very low, but it still works.
Yeah.
But and if that is one of the major way to reach out to the customers as well. So I think that is something which has to be really rethought of, that how it should be done. I'm not only talking about the products which we all deal in, the IT products and all, but and overall from an industry perspective.
Yeah. So there are lots of discussions and debates today going on in the whole world of marketing, and the whole ad tech industry, the martech industry, this concept of first party data, third party data. So it's an entire, I can take a 2-day course on that.
So Shivangi, the underlying fact is to tame the big, large internet companies like Facebook and Google and all that, or to, people like us also.
Actually, it's not so much to tame them, because you and I are happily signing up to them, to whatever they do, because we're using their products free. Today, I will happily give consent to whatever WhatsApp asks me to do, because I'm using WhatsApp free, right? That's a completely different ball game. This is for regular businesses.
So nothing can be done for organizations like Facebook and Google, who are providing freeware and still collecting data. Google, who probably knows much more than you yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are other laws coming up to, like, especially in Europe, they've really taken that up seriously. So the heart and center of this is, let's say, in North America, if you look at the CCPA, the California Act, where most of these companies are based, they actually have a right to what they call, do not sell. So one of the rights that they have is do not sell my data. Okay, because it all emerges from this data being sold and so on. But so it's not just one law that can tame all this, because it's a very complex ecosystem.
No, but saying that, let's say, for example, agreed, they might have the likes of Facebook and Google already have a lot of data being processed, and they are, collecting a lot of data. But under the DPDP Act, if these guys get breached and in that the Indian data gets leaked, that is where they will come under the, the fire of the law.
No, not just breaches, Ajay. They'll come if they misuse my data also, right? They use it for a purpose that I have. Problem is that I am giving my consent to everything.
No, so that's what, no. So because in consent, I'm writing everything.
Yeah.
I have given my death will to him that, they can declare me dead whenever they want, right? It's as good as that. But the point is that let's say, so there we cannot tame them. The idea is if tomorrow they get breached or, they suffer a cyber attack and the data of Facebook or LinkedIn or any other social media platforms or Google gets leaked, that is the only place where we can really tell them, unless until they take a consent from us also, that if our data is leaked, you cannot sue us.
No, that they can't do.
That they can't do, of course. But let's say, हम तो I agree करते हैं, हम थोड़ी ना देखने जाते हैं.
So you cannot take illegal consent, no?
हाँ.
You cannot take consent to something that circumvents the law. That is not allowed.
That's right. That's right.
So, but the point is that there are other laws, therefore, which are looking at, misuse of data in other ways. So this is just one aspect of the whole, piece around control and management of data. We ourselves are getting another, Digital India Act, and there are lots of other legislations that will come up. This is just the first.
Ajay, you probably won't get anything, but the government of India surely will in such a scenario.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, Kamal wanted to ask.
Kamal had a question.
So I think I just had an observation, and to my mind, that's where I think that we as a intermediary or resellers or the persons who are going to be in touch with customer will have a major role to play. My thinking is that even this big wigs, and over a period of time, if this really get adapted by the people in a big way, because then what you can do is that even all these big wigs you can control to a large extent, because what need to happen is that in terms of whatever consent they need to get, those need to be very clearly defined, and even we as a person will have the right for us to tell them that, oh, you will need to forget this. So these specific aspects which I think is getting misused, or this is something which I don't want anybody else to know. And because I think in the past it has happened that WhatsApp or Facebook and all of those to Indian government has said, no, we can't give this information to you. There has been a number of such times when the information about our people have not been given to the government. So to my mind, that possibly will take some time or quite a lot of time for those kind of stuff to happen. Because in my understanding, the evolution of all these organizations is happening primarily because of the kind of data they have. Absolutely. And with more and more people getting more knowledge, and if we really can reach this aspect out, possibly the valuation for all these big wigs and largely American companies, because they have the information like the way you said about Facebook and Google. Over a period of time, number of those things, and this is what I think Reliance is up to causing, that possibly more and more of those information really comes up and they gather all those here. So I think it's going to be a long game.
Yeah.
I don't want to say more on those because to my mind, all these are, and good aspect is like Aadhaar, like the kind of Aadhaar, the information that exists, and a lot of companies in startup domain, and to my mind, even American companies are using that information which is lying in Aadhaar, and the way that information can be used by each one of us. So possibly, I think we have got a long way to go. Possibly it will take us 10, 15 more years. But in that phase, possibly the kind of valuation which is coming out for startups across the globe or even these big wigs. So it will be controlled to a large extent, it seems.
So, Shivangi, we have a question from a member, but before that, I have a question. I mean, whatever Kamal just said. So you are aware that I am a chartered accountant. And what happens is that government interdepartmental data sharing also happens within the government. They do employ a lot of tools with regard to data mining. So let's say, for example, if something government has found out, let's say in the income tax, probably it will be shared with the GST, and it does get shared.
Right.
So is that kind of data sharing also tamed with these kind of laws? Because I still consider these laws are still in the evolving stage. We've not reached absolutely, not even the quarter mark as of now, with the kind of legislation we have now. We have a very long way to go.
Yeah.
But the question is that kind of data sharing within the government is also addressed here, or the government is
The
out?
government is not included in this.
No. Government is included,
is
but
it?
the government has retained powers to exclude whichever department they want to from this. Okay, and that's opening up a whole can of worms in terms of
Yes.
right. But to answer Prashant's question, it boils down to purpose again. What is the purpose for which the data is being shared? If it is to do fraud analysis, if it is to do track any kind of criminal or terrorist activities, which is what is called national interest or for security purposes, then that is allowed. But if it is, so it boils down to what purposes for which this is being, so it's going to take a very long time for some of these things
It just started actually.
Yeah.
Okay, coming back to the question from
Kailash Gupta.
This is from Rajiv actually.
Yeah, so there is a question before that from Kailash. What if data is compromised by ransomware from your organization? Who is responsible? And if the data is stolen from websites and goes to the dark web?
Yeah, you are responsible. You'll end up getting penalties.
Okay. The next question is from.
I want to just qualify that. Okay. So who declares these the quantum of penalties? It goes to the board. Now, any regulator, not just the Data Protection Board, will look at why this has happened. What have you done, right? So let's say you have taken all the measures possible to ensure that security attacks don't happen. Yet an attack has happened. The quantum of fines that you will be required to pay will be far less than, let's say, if you've done something which is called willful negligence. So under the law, you have the concept of willful negligence and something like that. So when we teach case studies around this, we actually have, when we teach this concept, we actually have case studies to help people identify that whether it's willful negligence or not, and then the quantum of thing comes down. So if I have to take an example from the earlier IT Act's sensitive personal data protection rules, there was Rule 8 which said that to demonstrate that you have taken the right measures for security, if you've implemented ISO 27001, it is deemed that you have taken the right measures, right? So stuff like that. So what is called demonstrability of accountability is very important, that you have to be able to demonstrate that, look, I have done my best, yet this has happened.
Okay. So having more proactive approach will really be helpful to get more leeway. Okay. There's another question by Rajiv. How do you see the future of behavior-based digital marketing? Example, FB allows you to get more impressions across a certain user behavior, while I as an advertiser don't get to know who these individuals are. Will it be allowed going forward for Facebook to offer that as a feature? What direction is the law going for this?
So see, this is, as I said, is addressing one piece of that whole problem. Okay. So it will address certain pieces. It will not address a whole lot of other pieces. So whether you will continue to receive that data or not, or whether Facebook will be hauled up for not, I think some more time needs to pass for some of these things to come up, because we have certain rules also that will come up. Okay. So some aspects may get curbed, some aspects may continue, but globally this is a problem that everybody's sort of tackling, And the whole, as I was mentioning, AdTech ecosystem itself is going through a huge overhaul. And so we'll have to wait and watch what happens.
Okay. Another question by Mohit Sharma. Is concept of deemed concept implied mentioned is legitimate use under Section 7 of DPDP Act? And if it is deemed consent, do we need to enter into bilateral NDA with employees, starting with employer will safeguard the data of employee?
Okay, so under the DPDPA as well as under every other law, you have something called lawful basis of processing. Okay, deemed consent is one lawful basis. Consent itself, explicit consent as we call it, is one lawful basis. Employment purposes is another lawful basis. So if I am, for example, processing data of my employees for employment purposes, I don't need to get consent from them, because instead of consent, I'm using the basis for processing as employment purposes. Okay, so these are two independent things, and I don't anyway. NDA is.
This will be well covered, Shivangi ma'am, in your next session. I think we are going to talk about the bill itself, what the bill talks all about that. So I think that it will be more clearer when you are able to describe the bill as a whole.
No, I covered the key aspects of the bill. I can do an in-depth thing, but I'll come to when I talk about implementation, I'll take up some of these aspects.
Perfect. There's one more question by Subramaniam, and I think this will be the last one because I think we are already overshot of the time.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any defined timeline to implement required controls? And from when does the DPDP Act come into being?
A good question. Everybody's asking that question. The Act has just says, the first clause just says that the government can decide which clause comes into effect when. The minister has been talking about 6 months, and then he's contradicting himself. I've seen him saying that, people have always known all of this. But I am personally hopeful that all legislations around the world have given at least 18 to 24 months. I am hoping that we get 18 to 24 months, because honestly, except for extremely small organizations, people will not finish implementation in less than 18 to 24. Even that is a very short time period.
Great. I think this is good. Kamal's last question is there. Kamalji's, what role we channel partners could play in DPDP?
You can help your clients implement DPDP.
Perfect. That's the best way to say it. Yeah. Okay. Prashantji, your closing statement, sir.
It was really interesting and interacting. So this is what I was expecting from you, Ajay, to be participative. Questions come from somebody else's questions, actually. So unless until we interact, how would we make it interesting for us and for others as well? So there have been a lot of thank you notes in the chat box, Shivangi. So people are happy, community is happy. I am very happy, personally speaking. Good to see you after so many years.
Yes.
To reconnect, actually.
Yeah.
So hopefully we will have more sessions with you.
So we are having
interacting with us. Sorry, Adi, you were saying something.
I was saying next week we already have a scheduled session with Shivangi ma'am, and one more after the third session. So I think in the first week of October we are having another session, the third session. So we have a series of three sessions we have planned out.
Great. So looking forward to see you again, Shivangi.
Thank you, sir. Look forward likewise.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Shivangi. Take care. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Chairman Saab, President Saab. Take care, guys.